Hi there, folks. Today we're looking at writing equations of circles. And in order to do this, we just need a couple pieces of information, and then we're going to plug it into our standard form for a circle. So the two things that we need really are the center and the radius. Once we have those two things, we can just plug this in, simplify just a little bit, and we'll have the equation of our circle. Okay? And just like anything else we've ever done with something like lines, when we're finding a linear equation, you find the slope and the y-intercept and plug it in. With parabolas, you find the vertex and the a value and plug it in. With these, you find the center, you find the radius, you plug it in. All right? So if I look at this first one, I've got a center at -4, 2, and a radius of 8. It gives me the two things that I need here. I've got the center, I've got the radius, and I'm just going to plug this into our standard form. So our standard form is x minus h. The h value this time is a -4, which is like a +4 when I do x minus a -4, squared plus y minus k, which is the 2, squared equals r squared. Well, my r value this time is 8, so r squared would be a 64. And that's it. Right? That's the equation of my circle that has a center at -4, 2 and a radius of 8. If I do the same thing with the next one, it's got a center at 3, 0. So I'm going to do x, and once again, I've got the two things I need, the center and the radius. So the center at 3, 0, radius at 2, radius of 2. So I do x minus h, which is the 3, squared, plus y minus k. Well, k this time is 0, and I wouldn't leave this as y minus 0. Y minus 0 is just y, so I end up with y squared equals r squared, which this time r is 2, so 2 squared is 4. All right, and I do want to make sure I simplify it this way. I don't want to leave this as y minus 0 in there and have y minus 0 squared. That's just y squared. I wouldn't leave the radius as 2 squared, or in the previous example, 8 squared. I actually want to multiply that out. And so this is the equation of my circle. Okay? If I look at the next one says a circle that has endpoints of the diameter at -2, -9, and 0, -5. And so the two things I need are not given this time. I need to find the center and the radius. And in order to find these things, there's a couple ways I could do this. I could find the radius first by finding the distance between these two endpoints, and that would give me the diameter. But then keep in mind I'd have to divide that by 2. I'm going to find the center first, because then I can go right to finding the radius. So if I want the center, and if I think about this, if I have a circle and I've got endpoints of the diameter, wherever they happen to be, the center of the circle has got to be halfway in between those because the diameter goes through the center. And so if I'm looking for the center here, I'm looking for the middle of these two values. I'm looking for the point that's halfway in between these. What I'm looking for is the midpoint. All right. So to find the center, I'm going to use my midpoint formula. So I do the midpoint formula where I add the x values together, the 0 plus the -2, and divide by the 2. And then I add the y values together, and then the -5 plus the -9, and divide by 2. And so when I do this, my midpoint here, 0 plus a -2 is a -2, divided by 2 is a -1. -5 plus a -9 is a -14, divided by 2 is a -7. So my midpoint, which is my center, is -1, -7. And now the radius is the distance from the center to one of the endpoints, or the center to the circle, or the center to the circumference. And I have 2 points that are on the circumference of the circle that are on the actual circle itself, and those are the endpoints of my diameter. So I can use either one of these and my midpoint formula. And I'm going to choose the second value just because it has a 0 in it. And so I use the distance formula and my midpoint, which is my center, and I'm going to find the distance between those two things. So here I do this is going to be x sub 2 minus x sub 1 plus the y sub 2 minus y sub 1. And so when I start plugging these values in, my x values, again, I'm finding the distance between, I'm going to use this point, the 0, -5, and I'm going to use my center. So when I do this, I've got 0 minus a -1 squared plus, here I have -5 minus a -7 squared. And I'm just going to keep simplifying this thing. This is like adding the opposite in here, so that's a 1 squared, which is 1. This one is also like adding the opposite, which gives me a 2 squared, which is 4. So what I end up with here is a distance that equals the square root of 5. And that's my radius, is the square root of 5. And notice I'm going to leave it in radical form like this, because keep in mind, when I plug this back into my equation, watch what happens. X minus h, which is negative 1, which is like plus 1 squared, plus y minus k, which is the negative 7, which is going to be like y plus 7 squared, equals r squared. Well, if I take that r value, the square root of 5, and I square it, gives me just a 5. And that's why I leave it in radical form, because when I plug it into my equation, I'm going to be squaring it anyway. All right? The most common mistake that we make here is we find the distance between the endpoints of the diameter, and I get double this value, and I would end up with a distance of 2 root 5. And the reason for that is because that's a diameter. If I want the radius, I would have to divide that by 2. Okay? If I look at the next one, it says a circle has a center of negative 9 and negative 12, and it passes through the point negative 4, negative 5, and I want to find the equation. So the two things I need are the center and the radius. Well, the center was given to me. It's negative 9, negative 12. The radius is just the distance from the center to the outer portion of the circle. So it's the distance between my center, which I am given, and the point that's on the circle, which I'm also given. So I just have to find the distance between these 2 points. So I'm going to subtract the x values. That's going to be a negative 9 minus a negative 4 squared, plus I subtract the y values, the negative 12 minus a negative 5 squared. And now I just have to simplify this thing. So I've got d equals the square root of. Right here, this is like adding the opposite. That gives me a negative 5 squared, which is 25. Here, this is like adding the opposite. That gives me a negative 7 squared, which is like a 49. And so I find out that the distance is the square root of 74. And from here, I could start looking for perfect squares that divide evenly into 74. But really, why bother? I'm going to leave it like this, and I'm not even going to bother simplifying this radical if I can, because I still know that when I plug this into my equation, x minus h, which is going to be like a plus 9 squared, plus y minus k, which is like a plus 12 squared, equals r squared. When I square that value, it cancels out my square root and just gives me the 74. And that's it. All right, so that's the equation of my circle. So we find the center, we find the radius, we plug it back in. Okay?